Tactical Space Lab is an experimental studio bringing artists and virtual reality together. Let's see what happened when they teamed up with visual artist Abdul Abdullah.
Around about that point on your mid-upper leg.
Well, it just sticks on like that?
Yep. It's really nice working with artists in emerging technology because artists have got a really strong sense of what comes with different ways of representing the world. Basically the opposite of a computer scientist or an engineer who thinks their decisions are kind of totally neutral. Whereas the artist knows that if they're choosing like one form of representation over another, there's a reason why they're choosing it and what comes with each decision.
Very Mission Impossible.
Kill beans. My name is Josh Hall and I've been running a VR studio called Tactical Space Lab. So what we're doing are these kind of incubator VR studios. It'll detect it in a minute. We host an artist, introduce them to VR, then start experimenting.
Yeah, that was good.
So the idea of working in a virtual world was pretty alien. I've got a very material practice. Everything is object and painting based. But putting the headset on the first time and seeing what was possible and seeing what people were doing out there, honestly was really surprising.
For the first few days, we just throw all of the VR experiences that we can find at them. Within a few days, generally, an artist will have a sense of something that they find particularly interesting and particularly resonant with their own practices. And then we can just start experimenting from there.
Prior to this, I was doing a large series of paintings of these forest scenes with giant rocks in them. And for me, they were almost self-portraits of a rock that had been there for a very long time, waiting for the world to change. And I thought this could be applied to that VR experience where a person could come into that space, a shared space with that rock, and to have a conversation.
As a kid called Awang, he lived with his father, who was a very pious man.
We wanted to make a situation where you were going to engage with it, and it's interesting beyond just being in the space and looking at it. So it had to be some type of exchange between you and the rock. I remember seeing this TV show years and years ago, which had these kids, like an experiment that they were given one Kinder Surprise, and they said if they wait and they didn't touch that Kinder Surprise, they'd get 2 Kinder Surprises. And it was a test. So I liked playing with that and applying that to this experience. You meet the rock, you talk to it, but there are temptations to move away, and there are consequences for those temptations. Not big consequences, but just consequences to the narrative.
Hey, what did I tell you? What did I tell you about paying attention? What did I tell you about focusing? This is a life lesson in itself. Okay, all right, now where was I?
I like the idea of an audience member coming into a work and discovering something that's just for them, and in that sense of discovery, feeling a sense of ownership. You can do that with painting, you can do that with an installation, but here in this VR experience, the conversation that you have and the way that you interact with it, that's entirely you. That sense of ownership, I think, is really important.
Facilitating or hosting these studios feels like magic, basically. The collaborative process is incredible. It's hard work, but it feels like you've created something that wouldn't have come out of either of us. So this is the third iteration really of the VR studios that we've been doing. 2018 was really interesting, sort of figuring out how it worked and trying not to be too intimidated by not knowing what you're going to do when you get there. 2020, a lot of what we did was presented in a lockdown context. Instead of openings where people would be physically present, we'd have live streams. And it was a really nice opportunity to both show the work and then have conversations around making the work. What I'm working on now is called a field guide to the interior. And we're basically taking the model with the different artists working in a studio context. We're also going to have all of the conversations that we would normally have in making that work and have it present in the work itself. Like having a making of kind of rolled into the project. All of the discussions will happen in VR as VR characters. And this is my VR avatar. Hi there. So while VR is an exciting creative tool for artists, it's also an area that's getting a lot of attention from big tech companies, most notably Facebook, now known as Meta. It's going to radically change how VR exists. Either turn it into an ubiquitous technology that everyone is using as a way of socially interacting, or just break it so it fails to be successful and it just falls away. Close your eyes and ears for a second. There's a little throwaway aside in their introduction to Meta about hyper-realistic avatars. I'm going to introduce Abdul to something. Someone pointed out that it was important to think about controlling your own appearance. Also a little bit creepy. They should have figured it out now. If they haven't, I don't think it's possible to really lock that stuff down. So this is an incomplete model view. That's not the creepy bit. The creepy bit...
It's pretty creepy.
It's a little bit creepy, but the creepiest bit is that, well...
Hello, my name is Abdul Abdullah. I was a soldier from the time I was a teenager until I was in politics.
What are you making me say with my voice? Josh got me to write a permission to be able to make an AI-generated version of my voice, which he then fed a whole bunch of interviews that I've done into, and then has made a chatbot that speaks with my actual voice, and you can ask it questions.
My name's Ben, but you can call me Dr. Al.
Quite confronting to hear my voice come back to me, saying things that I probably would never say. Feels really dangerous, but yeah, I really enjoyed it.
The AI-trained Abdul avatar was really fun to create as a kind of terrifying ghost story that might come true.
I know I've made some very poor decisions recently, but I can give you my complete assurance that my work will be back to normal.
Tactical Space Lab sits in a point of responding to changes in technology in a mitigating realm. Walk around in a kind of funky way to try and diffuse it from what it would be like if you didn't have broader perspectives involved in it.
It is very strange.
It's a continuation of what art does generally, which is try and break apart a single narrative to introduce more subtlety to the story.
I think that artists can definitely play a role in keeping it real.
So yeah, it's going to be interesting. It's going to be an interesting world.
Well, wasn't that a blast? Hey, thanks so much for your company. But before we go,